Oh, you finally showed up. Funny thing about losing, people think it's bad luck. They blame the world, their past, other people, anything but the truth. But deep down, you know, don't you? You're not losing because life is unfair. You're losing because you can't even control the one thing you're supposed to, yourself. That voice in your head that says, just one more time, you listen to it. That moment when you should have stopped, you didn't. And now, you're stuck in a loop you created. Isn't that hilarious? You keep waiting for motivation, for the right moment, for some magical change. But discipline, control, that's boring, painful, uncomfortable. So you run from it. And every time you run, you lose a little more of yourself. And the worst part, no one is coming to fix it. So today, we're not talking about success or dreams or fake positivity. We're talking about the brutal truth. Why you keep losing because you can't control yourself. You don't actually hate discipline. You hate how it feels. The moment something becomes uncomfortable, your mind starts negotiating. It whispers small excuses that sound harmless. I'll start tomorrow, just this once. I deserve a break. And you listen, not because they're true, but because they're easier than facing discomfort. Discipline demands friction. It asks you to act when you don't feel like it, to keep going when your energy drops, to choose long-term results over short-term relief. That tension is exactly what you try to escape. Your brain is wired to protect you from discomfort, not to build your future. So when you sit down to work, your mind searches for an exit. It remembers how good it feels to scroll, to relax, to avoid effort. And suddenly the hard thing feels unnecessary, even painful. You convince yourself that avoiding it is harmless, but every time you walk away, you reinforce a pattern. You teach yourself that discomfort is something to run from, not something to face. Over time, that pattern becomes your default behavior. It doesn't look dangerous at first. Skipping one workout, delaying one task, breaking one promise to yourself. It feels small, but those small moments stack up. Each time you choose comfort, you weaken your ability to handle pressure. You lose a bit of control, a bit of trust in yourself. And slowly, without realizing it, you become someone who quits when things get hard. Not because you lack potential, but because you've trained yourself to avoid the very process that builds it. What makes it worse is how normal it feels. Everyone around you is doing the same thing, chasing comfort, avoiding effort, looking for shortcuts. So your behavior doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like life. But deep down, there's a quiet awareness that something isn't right. You know you're capable of more. You know you're wasting time, energy, opportunities. That awareness creates tension, but instead of using it to change, you distract yourself again, and the cycle repeats. Discomfort is where growth lies, but you've learned to associate it with pain instead of progress. When something feels hard, you interpret it as a sign to stop. In reality, it's a signal that you're exactly where you need to be. That resistance you feel is not your enemy. It's the gateway. But because you've avoided it for so long, even small challenges feel overwhelming. Your tolerance for discomfort shrinks, and your world shrinks with it. You start building your life around what feels easy. You choose convenience over challenge, distraction over focus, comfort over control. And while it keeps you safe in the moment, it quietly limits everything you can become. Opportunities require effort. Growth requires consistency. Control requires sacrifice. Without those, you stay stuck in the same place, repeating the same patterns, wondering why nothing changes. The truth is, discipline isn't about motivation or willpower. It's about your relationship with discomfort. Right now, you see it as something to avoid, something negative, something that drains you. But the people who move forward see it differently. They understand that discomfort is temporary, but the results it creates are lasting. They don't wait to feel ready. They act despite the resistance. Every time you choose to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, you take back a piece of control. It's not dramatic. It doesn't feel powerful in the moment. In fact, it feels slow, quiet, almost insignificant. But those small decisions reshape your identity. They turn you into someone who can handle pressure, who can stay consistent, who doesn't run when things get hard. Right now, the problem isn't your goals, your talent, or your circumstances. It's the simple habit of avoiding what feels uncomfortable. And until you face that, nothing changes. You don't notice your habits while they're forming. You only feel their consequences once they've already taken control. The small things you repeat every day don't look dangerous. Scrolling a little longer, delaying a task, choosing the easier option, breaking one promise to yourself. It all feels harmless in the moment. But habits don't work in single moments. They work in patterns. And your patterns are quietly shaping who you are becoming. Every habit you repeat is a vote for a version of yourself. When you choose distraction over focus, you're reinforcing a mindset that avoids effort. When you delay something important, you're training your brain to believe that pressure can be escaped. And when you consistently pick comfort over discipline, you build a system where control becomes weaker over time. It's not one big decision that ruins you. It's the repetition of small ones that slowly take away your power. The dangerous part is how automatic it becomes. At some point, you stop making conscious choices. Your habits start making them for you. You reach for your phone without thinking. You procrastinate before you even realize it. You avoid challenges as if it's your default setting. And because it feels natural, you don't question it. You assume that's just who you are, when in reality, it's what you've practiced. Your brain is constantly looking for efficiency. It turns repeated actions into shortcuts so you don't have to think every time. That's how habits are built. But it doesn't care whether those habits are helping you or destroying you. If you repeat something enough, your brain locks it in. And once it's locked in, it becomes harder to break. That's why bad habits feel so powerful. They've been reinforced over and over again, while discipline has been ignored. You might think you lack motivation, but what you really lack is a system of habits that support your goals. Motivation fades quickly, habits stay, and if your habits are built around avoidance, comfort, and distraction, they will override any temporary burst of motivation you feel. You can get inspired for a day, maybe even a week, but your habits will pull you back to what's familiar. There's also a hidden conflict happening inside you. On one side, you have your goals, the version of yourself you want to become. On the other side, you have your habits, the version of yourself you keep practicing. And every day, those two sides clash. You say you want growth, but your habits say you prefer comfort. You say you want control, but your actions show inconsistency. And over time, your habits win because they're repeated more often than your intentions. What makes it worse is that bad habits don't feel bad at first. They feel good. They give you immediate relief, instant pleasure, quick escape. That's why they're so easy to repeat. But that short-term reward comes with a long-term cost. It drains your focus, weakens your discipline, and reduces your ability to handle pressure. And by the time you feel the consequences, the habit is already deeply rooted. You start to notice the effects in subtle ways. Tasks feel harder than they should. Your attention span shortens. You struggle to stay consistent even with simple routines. And you begin to question yourself. Why is this so difficult? The answer isn't a lack of ability. It's the accumulation of habits that are working against you. Breaking these patterns isn't about one big decision. It's about becoming aware of what you repeat daily. Every action, no matter how small, is shaping your behavior. If you keep feeding habits that promote distraction and avoidance, you strengthen them. If you interrupt them and replace them with better choices, you slowly shift your direction. Control isn't something you suddenly gain. It's something you build through repetition. The same way your bad habits were formed, your discipline can be formed. But it requires consistency in the moments that don't feel important. The moments when no one is watching, when it would be easier to fall back into old patterns. Those are the moments that define whether you stay stuck or start changing. You've trained yourself to chase what feels good now, even when it costs you later. That pull toward instant gratification isn't random. It's something you've reinforced over time. Every time you choose the quick reward over the hard task, you strengthen the habit of avoiding effort. It feels small in the moment, almost harmless. A few extra minutes of scrolling, a short break that turns into hours, choosing entertainment over responsibility. But these choices are not isolated. They're building a pattern that slowly weakens your ability to stay in control. Your brain is wired to prioritize immediate rewards. It wants pleasure, relief, and ease as quickly as possible. So when you're faced with something that requires patience or effort, it pushes you towards something easier. And because those easy options are always available, you rarely have to sit with discomfort. You escape before the struggle even begins. Over time, that escape becomes automatic. You don't think about it, you just follow the path that feels better in the moment. The problem is that instant gratification doesn't just delay progress, it reshapes your tolerance. The more you give in to it, the less capable you become of handling anything that requires time and discipline. Tasks that demand focus start to feel overwhelming. Waiting becomes frustrating. Effort feels unnecessary. You begin to expect results without enduring the process, and when reality doesn't match that expectation, you lose motivation quickly. It also creates a false sense of satisfaction. You feel busy, entertained, even relaxed, but none of it moves you forward. You get a temporary boost of pleasure, but it fades quickly, leaving you exactly where you started. And because the reward is so short-lived, you keep going back for more. It becomes a cycle. Seek pleasure, feel relief, lose time, repeat. And with each repetition, your control weakens a little more. What makes this even more dangerous is how normal it has become. The world around you is built to feed this habit. Everything is designed to give you quick rewards, endless content, constant notifications, instant access to anything you want. You don't have to wait, struggle, or earn most of the things you consume. And because of that, your patience shrinks. Your ability to delay gratification fades. You get used to receiving without working for it. This creates a gap between what you want and what you're willing to do. You want growth, success, improvement. But those things require consistency, effort, and time. They don't provide instant rewards. So your brain resists them. It pulls you back toward what's easier, faster, and more enjoyable. And even when you know what you should be doing, you feel stuck choosing the opposite. You might tell yourself you'll change tomorrow, that you'll be more disciplined later. But tomorrow comes with the same patterns, the same urges, the same habits. Because the issue isn't your intention, it's your conditioning. You've trained your mind to expect immediate satisfaction, and anything that doesn't provide it feels harder than it actually is. There's also a deeper cost you don't always notice. When you constantly give in to instant gratification, you weaken your sense of control. You start to feel like your actions are driven by impulse rather than choice. You react instead of deciding, and that loss of control affects everything. Your focus, your consistency, your confidence. You begin to doubt your ability to stick to anything because you've seen yourself give in too many times. Breaking this cycle doesn't mean removing pleasure from your life. It means changing your relationship with it. It means learning to sit with discomfort without immediately escaping it. It means choosing actions that don't feel rewarding right now, but will benefit you later. That shift is difficult, especially at first, because it goes against everything you've practiced. But every time you delay gratification, even in small ways, you rebuild your control. You prove to yourself that you can choose long-term results over short-term relief. And slowly, that choice becomes easier. Not because the discomfort disappears, but because your ability to handle it grows. You say things to yourself you don't even take seriously anymore. I'll start tomorrow. I won't do it again. This time I'm serious. The words come easily, almost automatically. But the follow-through, that's where everything breaks. And the more it breaks, the less those words mean. Not to others, to you. Every promise you make to yourself is supposed to build trust. It's supposed to strengthen your sense of control, your identity, your belief that you can rely on your own decisions. But when you keep breaking those promises, the opposite happens. You start to weaken that connection. You begin to see your own words as temporary, flexible, optional. Something you say in the moment, not something you live by. At first, it doesn't feel like a big deal. Missing one day, skipping one task, delaying one plan. It seems small. You tell yourself you'll make up for it later. But later rarely comes the way you imagine. And each time you let it slide, you reinforce a pattern. Your commitments don't need to be honored. They can be adjusted based on how you feel. That's where the real damage begins. Because once your actions are controlled by your mood instead of your decisions, consistency disappears. You only show up when it feels right, when the energy is there, when the resistance is low. And when it's not, you step back. Over time, that creates instability. You can't build anything solid on inconsistent behavior. There's also a quiet shift in how you see yourself. You start questioning your own discipline, your ability to stay committed, your strength. You hesitate before setting goals because deep down, you're not sure you'll follow through. And that hesitation limits you. It keeps you from aiming higher, from pushing further, from expecting more from yourself. Breaking promises to yourself doesn't just affect your actions, it affects your identity. You begin to label yourself in subtle ways. Someone who struggles to stay consistent. Someone who gives in easily. Someone who starts but doesn't finish. These labels don't appear overnight. They're built through repeated experiences where your actions didn't match your intentions. What makes this cycle even stronger is how you justify it. You tell yourself you were tired, stressed, distracted. And sometimes those reasons are real. But they don't change the outcome. The promise was still broken. And when you keep finding reasons instead of solutions, the pattern continues. You don't lose control all at once. You lose it in moments where you had a choice and chose the easier path. Moments where you knew what you should do but decided not to. And every time that happens, you weaken your ability to choose differently next time, because you've shown yourself that giving in is acceptable. Rebuilding that control isn't about making bigger promises. It's about making smaller ones, and actually keeping them. It's about restoring the connection between what you say and what you do. Because right now, that connection is fragile, and without it, discipline can't exist. When you start keeping even the smallest commitments, something shifts. You begin to rebuild trust with yourself. Slowly, quietly, without any dramatic change. You stop relying on motivation and start relying on action. You prove to yourself that your words have weight again. But until that happens, every broken promise adds to the same pattern. A pattern where your intentions sound strong, but your actions don't follow. And as long as that gap exists, control stays out of reach. You think losing is something that happens to you, but most of the time, it's something you allow. Not in one big obvious moment, but in quiet decisions you barely notice. The moments where you could have chosen control, but didn't. Where you knew what was right, but went with what felt easier. That's where the pattern starts, and that's why it keeps repeating. Control isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's about making decisions that align with what you said you would do, even when it doesn't feel good. Right now, your actions are driven more by impulse than intention. You react to urges, moods, distractions. You let them decide for you. And every time that happens, you give away a little more control. It feels small in the moment. Giving in once doesn't seem like failure. But control isn't lost in one moment. It's lost in repetition. When giving in becomes normal, when discipline becomes optional, when your standards adjust based on how you feel, that's when losing becomes consistent. Not because you're incapable, but because your behavior is inconsistent. There's a gap between who you say you want to be and how you actually act. And that gap is filled with moments where you chose comfort over control. You want progress, but you avoid the process. You want results, but resist the effort. And until those two sides match, you stay stuck in the same cycle, wanting more, doing less. The hardest part is that control doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels restrictive. It feels uncomfortable. It asks you to say no when you want to say yes, to continue when you want to stop, to focus when your mind is pulling you elsewhere. It doesn't give you instant rewards. In fact, it often feels like you're missing out in the moment. That's why it's so easy to avoid. But what you don't see immediately is what control builds over time. It creates stability. It builds confidence. It gives you the ability to rely on yourself, no matter the situation. Without it, everything becomes unpredictable. Your progress depends on your mood. Your results depend on your motivation. And both of those are unreliable. You might think you need more motivation, more inspiration, more energy. But none of that matters if you don't have control. Because even when those things show up, they don't last. And when they fade, you're left with your habits, your patterns, your decisions. If those aren't strong, nothing changes. There's also a point where losing stops feeling surprising and starts feeling familiar. You expect things to fall apart. You expect yourself to quit, to delay, to fall back into old patterns. And that expectation becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. You act in ways that match it, reinforcing the same outcome again and again. Control breaks that cycle. Not in a dramatic way, but in small, consistent decisions. Choosing to act when you don't feel like it. Choosing to stop when you know you should. Choosing to stay focused when distractions are pulling you away. These choices don't feel significant in the moment, but they change everything over time. You don't need to wait for a different version of yourself to appear. The version that has control is built through these decisions, through repetition, through doing what's necessary instead of what's comfortable. And the longer you delay that, the longer the cycle continues. At some point, it becomes simple. Not easy, but simple. Either you control yourself or you keep losing.